Ahoy, mateys, and welcome to This Week in Nickelodeon History. I'm your host, Captain Eric, and on this episode, we're going to celebrate some Nickelodeon anniversaries that have happened in between the times of August 14th to August 20th. And just so you know, up on YouTube this past week, I uploaded my interview with Shift, the streamer who also holds the speed running record for both the Any Percent and 100% for SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. We talk about the game, we talk about streaming, we talk about speedrunning, and if you're not sure what that is, it's the art of beating a video game extremely fast, but not just, in its 100% means, but also through the uses of glitches and techniques that take an extreme amount of patience and dexterity to handle at a moment's notice, especially when you're on the brink of a world record run. So we go through a lot of Battle for Bikini Bottom. I mean, the man knows that game as inside and out as you could get without being a developer for it. So yeah, check that out. Put in a lot of work for the special art for that video. So if you're a fan of Captain Eric, regardless on if you watch the entire interview, go and show that video some love. It'll be greatly appreciated. I also missed 2 Nickelodeon films that released this month. I apparently did not have them on my calendar, and I will be covering them at the end of This Week in Nickelodeon History, as I'm not going to have them get in the way of everything else that we're properly celebrating this week, like the 30-year anniversary of Roundhouse. Roundhouse first premiered on August 15th, 1992. It was created by Buddy Sheffield and Rita Sheffield Hester. And honestly, variety show, I feel, is almost an understatement when it comes to Roundhouse. This was on during the SNCC lineup during its time, 4 seasons, 52 episodes. It was apparently extremely popular during its time, but I have zero recollection, as I've said, anytime bringing Roundhouse up. I was watching Nickelodeon hardcore at its time of airing, but I have zero recollection of a commercial, the theme song. I've gone back and watched episodes of Roundhouse when they were airing them on the 90s or all that, and I got to tell you, just no memory of it. But that's not going to stop me from at least talking about it a bit more here, since we are on its 30th anniversary. It originally debuted, as I mentioned, a part of the original SNCC lineup, and if Buddy Sheffield isn't a name that sounds familiar, you may be familiar with a show that he had worked on. He was a former writer for In Living Color, which if you... I know I said, like, for those that might know this, if you are above a certain age, you will certainly know In Living Color. It's a older show that aired from 1990 until 1994. Obviously, if you're younger, it might not, spark a light bulb in your mind right away. It is best known for being the sketch comedy show that housed the antics and absolute mastery of physical comedy Jim Carrey, where SNL, Saturday Night Live, they didn't pick up Jim Carrey. He auditioned for them. They knew they couldn't handle that guy. He was too much, because he would have just became the star of the show. It would have been Jim Carrey Night Live every Saturday. But In Living Color brought in Jim, and alongside just other greats, David Alan Grier, Tommy Davidson, the whole Wayans family. It's an absolutely fantastic show, and if you are into sketch comedy in any way, even if you're just a fan of Saturday Night Live, I would say dip your toes in the other pools of sketch comedy, SCTV, In Living Color, Mad TV. Those are some options for you. But yeah, Buddy Sheffield, alongside his wife Rita, created the show and brought in recording artist Benny Hester as the music producer, as well as a co-producer of the series. Now, if you were like me and it took a little bit for the names to kind of all come into play here for a second. Wait a minute. Buddy Sheffield, Rita Sheffield Hester, Benny Hester. I handed you all the variables. You can do the equation. I'm not doing that here. The title of the show, Roundhouse, is a reference to railway roundhouses, these circular buildings that are meant for storing and servicing trains, locomotives, anything that can ride on tracks. And it's a reference to the fact that literally the show can go anywhere. Sure, it's a sketch comedy show, but it's a sketch comedy show not in the sense that we're going from set to set and here's a new story, here's new characters. We're doing that at the snap of a finger. You're moving on from one little bit that takes maybe, 3-4 minutes, and then you're moving on to a dance sequence, and then that dance sequence can move on to another, comedy bit, and it's very minimal. There's no big costume changes for these actors, and all of them, you have to have a certain level of charisma to be able to go on a stage and tell an audience, I'm not going to dress up in any different costumes. I'm not going to put any backgrounds behind me. You're just going to have to go with whatever I'm telling you. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the cast members here in order of last name alphabetically. Brian Anthony, Alfred Carr Jr., Jennifer Chi-Chi, John Crane, Mark David, Sean Daywall, Ivan Dudinsky, Mickey Duran, Amy Ilrich, Seymour Willis Green, Crystal Lewis, Dominic Lucero, Sean Munaz, David Nicole, Natalie Nucci, Natasha Pierce, Julian Renee, David Sodini, and Lisa Vale. Dominic Lucero, though, was a cast member only through the first season and 3 episodes of the 3rd season of the show. While production of the 4th season was underway, on July 1st, 1994, Dominic Lucero passed away at the age of 26. He was diagnosed with lymphoma and kept his diagnosis completely privately to himself and left the audience and public unaware of his condition. The series finale of the show is dedicated in his memory, where the opening monologue was, "This one's for our friend Dominic, who couldn't be here." Even throughout his diagnosis and passing, Dominic remained in the opening intro for Roundhouse throughout the entirety of the series' run. If you were a fan of Dominic and his time on Roundhouse, I'm sure hearing of this news was a bit of a shock and certainly a saddened one. But now that we know that his time on this world was so short, it brings me comfort to know that during that short period of time, he was able to get to be on a show like Roundhouse and show the world some of the skills he had to offer. And what a beautiful moment that is to happen. So many don't get to even show anyone outside of their mind what they're able to do. But we got to see a little bit of the talent of Dominic before his untimely passing. I may not have any personal memories for Roundhouse. I may not. But I know that, hey, a show that lasts 4 years, 52 episodes, hey, there's a massive part of my generation who have a lot of memories of Roundhouse, have memories of episodes, have memories of characters, memories of segments, and just even memories of what they were doing or who they were watching it with. Snick was a moment for friends to get together on Saturday nights if you happen to be stuck inside with nothing else to do. So if you have any Roundhouse memories, please share them with me. Celebrate its 30th anniversary. Let me know if you have any favorite cast members, any favorite segments. And everybody, let's raise a glass here today and honor the 30th anniversary of Roundhouse. 26 years ago, on August 17th, 1996, we had the premiere of Kenan Kel. Now, technically, on July 15th, 1996, we had the premiere of Kenan Kel, but according to some, the airing of the pilot episode simply doesn't count, that it's not the series premiere. And to that, I say you're wrong, but, I already had so much planning into talking about Kenan and Kel this week that I'm just going to make you right so that I have an excuse to talk about Kenan and Kel. But especially because this episode here, the second episode of Kenan and Kel's first season, is one of my favorite episodes, and it is a part of my top 5 of the week. Shameless plug for later in the episode, so if you are interested in finding out what my top 5 Kenan and Kel episodes are, you should stay tuned. But I absolutely love Kenan and Kel, created by Kim Bass. The show ran for 4 seasons of 65 episodes. Without a doubt, Kenan Thompson and Kel Mitchell are the 2 most important actors in Nickelodeon history. They came at a time when there was so much live-action content on Nickelodeon and stole the show on especially a variety show packed with so much talent, and stole the show week after week after week until Nickelodeon said, okay, enough, you can just have your own show. And birthed out of that was Kenan and Kel, one of my favorite single-camera sitcoms in Nickelodeon history, following the adventures of a fictional version of Kenan and Kel, Kenan Rockmore and Kel Kimball, living in Chicago, Illinois, and just living life day by day, trying to make a buck, coming up with new schemes. And honestly, there's a lot of reminders of the Honeymooners throughout Kenan and Kel, where Kenan plays almost a young Ralph Cramden, and Kel plays the Ed Norton character to the Ralph Cramden. And I'm not talking about the actor Ed Norton. For those that don't know the Honeymooners, if you've ever watched The Flintstones, then you essentially have watched the Honeymooners. The Honeymooners is an old sitcom back in the 50s, black and white days, where a ton of the plots for the show took Jackie Gleason playing Ralph Cramden, trying to come up with some schemes and trying to make ways to get an extra buck in life. And he was always tailed by his friend, Ed Norton, who was played by Art Carney, and a bit more of a dim-witted fellow. And honestly, that dynamic was adapted pretty much almost one-to-one with Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble. And if you can think of that dynamic, well, now put those same archetypes here with Kenan Rockmore and Kel Kimball. You got a bit of a young Ralph Cramden and his young friend Ed Norton let loose on Chicago, Illinois, trying to make a buck and always getting into trouble. I absolutely love Kenan and Kel. It still stands the test of time, at least to me. I don't think it's a sitcom that you could watch today and it feels that old and dated. And that's the best thing about certain sitcoms, is that even when you can clearly see that they are, older, there's still quality jokes and humor to be found. If the writing is good, it can stand the test of time. There's episodes of The Honeymooners that are still funny to this day. There's episodes of Sanford and Son that are still funny to this day. You can watch those shows and go, man, this is almost 70 years old. But they still work. They're still written well, and they're still funny. And I have to say, I think that even after 70 years, Kenan and Kel will still be of some quality. I do feel that. 23 years ago, on August 16th, 1999, we had the premiere of Rocket Power. Created by Arlene Klasky and Gabar Chupo, the show ran for 4 seasons of 71 episodes. Born out of the extreme sports rise of the late 90s, Rocket Power, as we had just mentioned previously, as it ended July 30th, 2004, so I'm not going to retread too much of what I had just said, but Rocket Power was born at the right time. While all of these extreme sports were on the rise, there was a hunger for extreme sports from the public, and it was only inevitable that studios would come along and try to capture that love for animation, and you would think, all right, well, if you're going to go after skateboarding, just do skateboarding. But Rocket Power literally featured every single extreme sport that was massive at the time. Of course, there was skateboarding, but they also had surfing. They had extreme BMX. They had rollerblading. They even featured episodes that had those metal scooters that were on the rise from, companies like Razor, alongside extreme sports from around the world, including zorbing. In the Race Across New Zealand special, Zorbing was one of the parts of the race for the Rocket Kids and all the other characters involved. If you're not familiar with the term Zorbing, it's those giant plastic blown up balls that you can hop into. You can get in, and then you're supposed to go down a hill, and it just throws you around and whatnot. The first time I ever saw Zorbing was from Rocket Power. It introduced that to me, and I'm sure there were many other elements of those other extreme sports I mentioned that were brought to an entire new generation because of Rocket Power. And it did it in a respectful way. It's crazy. You think having a show where your main character is just literally like a created skater in a Tony Hawk game with all the stats maxed out, you'd think having a kid that good would not make for good stories. But hey, I enjoyed Rocket Power from beginning to end, all 4 seasons. I don't think it has aged as well as other Nicktoons. In particular, our main character at hand, Otto Rocket. I don't think Otto has aged as well as some other Nicktoon characters have. But even as an adult, I enjoy the world of Rocket Power. I want to visit Ocean Shores. I want to go to that pier, be at the Shore Shack, get some advice from Tito. What do the ancient Hawaiians have to say about some of the troubles in my life? I want to go surfing with Raymundo at the secret spot, even though I've never been. And here's one thing. Even if you thought you couldn't be good at any of these sports, surfing, skateboarding, but then you watched a character like Sam the Squid Dullard start out very terribly, very uncoordinated on skates, on skateboards, but just continue with them, whereas by the end of the series is confidently riding alongside his friends. And you're able to watch that progression, which should just give you the key advice that you may not be good at something, but if you stick with it, you are eventually going to be good at it. A bunch of you listening are probably saying to yourself, Captain Eric, hopefully you take your own advice, and to that I say, yes, I do. But if you're a fan of Rocket Power, I don't want to know who your favorite main character is. I want to know who your favorite side character is, because that's one of the best things about this show. Rocket Power, I would say more than any other Klasky Chupo show, has one of the best groups of side characters ever. I would say over any Nicktoon. It's one of the best. In terms of like a city, a town, the thriving environment, the characters that work inside that town, the other kids that you see, the other people you interact with, and then how they're used. Rocket Power, one of the best ofs. And hey, look, Klasky Chupo had a lot of years under their belt before they got into Rocket Power to help bolster how much writing they could put into the show and how many characters they can handle at once. So it's understandable by that time why it was so good. But yeah, let me know what your favorite side character is in the comments below. 22 years ago, on August 14th, 2000, we had the premiere of Dora the Explorer. Created by Chris Gifford, Valerie Walsh Valdez, and Eric Weiner, the show ran for 8 seasons of 178 episodes. Blue's Clues may have made a massive impact when it premiered and left a paw print on Nick Jr. that was hard to erase. But there's no denying that Dora the Explorer is, from all accounts, the greatest Nick Jr. show ever. Not just from the popularity of its one show, but it had a popular spin-off, it had a second decently popular spin-off, a live-action theatrical movie, and in some ways is still ongoing in some regard as a new live-action series is being made for Paramount+. Dora seemingly never really had to take that break away from viewers like Blue did, which I only have to imagine is because of the fact that one is a cartoon and the other really requires a live-action host to be there in the environment. And without that host, you can't really have Blue's Clues. They tried that with Blue's Room to see if they could continue these characters in another way, and that really didn't work out that well. But Dora, being a cartoon, could introduce other characters like Diego, who could go on to star in his own show, could continually go on year after year after year, just telling new stories. And the stories are very basic because every single Dora the Explorer story just has her going from point A to point B where you, the viewer, are helping her out in any way you can by shouting out directions to the screen, parts of the map, and also to stop Swiper from swiping, because apparently Swiper the fox has a dedicated code to himself that he will not steal anything as long as you say Swiper no swiping 3 times. He will stop swiping anything at a moment's notice. What a good guy. He doesn't have to do that. He doesn't have to listen. It's just a personal code he must have made to himself at some point along the way. I didn't really watch a ton of Dora the Explorer. By the time it premiered, I was 9 years old, about to turn 10. Wasn't really watching Nick Jr. at the time unless I was homesick. A few years later, my brother would be born, and I would find myself watching preschool shows with him. But Dora the Explorer really wasn't one of the shows he enjoyed. He would rather watch shows like Lazy Town and even Sesame Street at 4 or 5 years old. Dora was just not, his... Sorry about that. My rabbit is having a tantrum because the food that we get for him, and pretty much any rabbit food out there that is not just generic brown pellets, if it has any sort of extra additives to it, any bits, it's pretty much like the marshmallows in a bowl of Lucky Charms and giving that to a kid, where a kid wants to eat all the marshmallows and then they're upset that the oats are all that's left. So he's dealing with that right now, where all that is left in his bowl are oats. So if you go back and listen, you can hear him like biting on his bowl there, having a tantrum attack. Hey, just like a kid who might enjoy watching Dora the Explorer. Unlike my brother, though, who would rather watch other shows other than Dora, it came on once in a while. Even Diego, I think he watched a bit more than the regular Dora the Explorer. But Dora was a part of so many childhoods that's all that really matters at the end of the day when it comes to these preschool shows. Doesn't matter what any 30-plus-year-old man has to say about it on the internet. What really matters is the effect it had on you as a kid. What did it teach you about the world? Whether or not it has to be something specifically about a word in Spanish or a math equation. You could have learned social skills from those characters. Like what thing in your life could you attribute to all of the times you watched Dora the Explorer? That's what's the most important. That, among any other shows that you watch at that age, preschool level shows, yes, are there to entertain, but hopefully something along the way, some little moment in the show could help a kid out, teach them something. It's something that they might not even know they're going to bring along with them for the rest of their lives. And I'm sure that happened many times along Dora's constant trek through the jungles, completely unattended by her parents, with only the help of Boots the monkey. But 22 years later, and you're still exploring Dora, new avenues of entertainment. Hopefully the live-action show does well for you. If not, I'm sure they'll reboot the cartoon at some point. 21 years ago, on August 18th, 2001, The Origin of Donnie premiered on Nickelodeon. Technically, it is 4 episodes that take part of the Wild Thornberrys' 4th season, but it aired as a TV movie, The Origin of Donnie, which promised viewers to finally give us the long-awaited story behind a character that up to this point really wasn't given much of a backstory other than the fact that the Thornberrys had found this kid at some point in their travels. They just came across this wild child and made him a part of the Thornberry clan. And that's it. The intro for the Wild Thornberrys says it all. Donnie, we found him. That's it. That's all they have to tell you, and that's all you really need to know, other than the fact that Donnie is voiced by Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea, who is also an actor in one of my favorite movies, The Big Lebowski. A little bit of a piece of Captain Eric trivia for you. That's not my favorite movie of all time. It's just one of my favorites, but a little piece of trivia there for you about Flea, Captain Eric. But also, as far as the origins of Donnie are concerned, I don't remember a ton of specifics about the episode, but I will tell you, I wasn't disappointed. By the 4th season, I don't think it was still that much of a burning question as to where they found Donnie, because it was a question they just pushed to the side for so long. As a viewer, I just felt, well, all right, hey, you just found them. I don't really need to be told. But once hey, we're going to tell us the story proper, I was interested. And at the time, I just remember being satisfied with the story at hand. Certainly, I'd love to go back and watch it, as the Wild Thornberrys are well deserving of another watch through. I'll get to that one of these days. But until then, certainly, if you have a favorite Donnie moment or a favorite Donnie quote, leave that in the comments below. 14 years ago, on August 17th, 2008, we had the final episode of All Grown Up. Created by Arlene Klasky, Gabar Chupo, and Paul Germain, All Grown Up is a spin-off of The Rugrats, also created by Arlene Klasky, Gabar Chupo, and Paul Germain, which follows the adventures of our band of babies, but all 10 years older. What are the daily lives of Tommy, Chucky, Phil, Lil, Dill, Kimmy, Angelica, and Susie? Well, it's a lot of teenage drama and new avenues to find friends, experiences, adventures. These are certainly not the Rugrats you grew up with. I mean, they are the same characters, but they're not going on adventures in their backyard thinking that certain objects are massive obstacles. They're actually going through the obstacles of life and having to deal with them. What's really interesting at the core of this show is the Rugrats again themselves and their dynamics that have grown from the time that they were toddlers and babies. But you'd think, hey, Tommy is this brave kid. He is a born leader through and through. But now you're seeing Tommy, 10 years older, having anxiety, dealing with situations where he doesn't feel the bravest. And that may come to a shock for, people who grew up with the Rugrats and have watched them for 10 years up to that point. But you got to remember, you're constantly growing yourself. You're constantly evolving. Every 10 years of your life, you're technically a different person. Every 10 years is going to mold you into the next level of your maturity. And Tommy, Chucky, Phil, Lil, Dill, they're all dealing with it, while all of the adult characters around them are practically the same people, even though 10 years have changed them very slightly. Those 10-year changes that I had just mentioned, they slow down the older you get. You start kind of settling into who you are as a person more in your 30s and your 40s than you will when you're 10 or when you're just turning 13. I may not love All Grown Up as much as I do the Rugrats proper, but I absolutely love moments of All Grown Up. The beginning of All Grown Up when it first started, especially with that special, that moment in my life is always going to be memorable to me. So the older versions of these characters are always going to be just as memorable. I don't think I've ever been more excited to watch a TV special than I was for Rugrats All Grown Up. And that excitement certainly kept for the few years in between that special and the premiere of the series. I wanted to see more of these characters that I grew up with and to see how they are during my teenage years. And you know what? If they eventually want to go back down that well and give us a sequel to All Grown Up and show us how these kids are now doing as adults, I don't want to see that, because I just don't want to see any of these characters I cherish have to deal with any of the troubles of adulthood. Let them stay as teenagers for the rest of their lives. They don't need to race into mortgages and insurance plans and anything else that comes with being an adult. So the Rugrats, as far as this continuity is concerned, just stay as teenagers for the rest of their lives. We don't need to see whatever happens to them in their later years. I at least don't have that question. I found out the answers to that question myself, and let me tell you, the answers are not worth looking for. 11 years ago, on August 20th, 2011, True Jackson VP finished its run on Nickelodeon. Created by Andy Gordon, the show ran for 3 seasons of 60 episodes. 6 years ago, on August 20th, 2016, Make It Pop finished its run on Nickelodeon. Created by Thomas W. Lynch and Nick Cannon, the show ran for 2 seasons of 42 episodes. Exactly 1 year ago, on August 20th, 2021, we had the premiere of 2 Nickelodeon movies. Both movies were dropped on streaming services on that day, but one of them happened to get a theatrical release. Paw Patrol the Movie was released in theaters on August 20th, 2021. Directed by Cal Brunker, the movie went on to make $144.3 million at the box office, based off of a $26 million budget. On the same day, it premiered on Paramount Plus, but over on the Netflix side of things, we had the premiere of the Roundhouse movie. The film, directed by Dave Needham, is based off of the Roundhouse Nicktoon and was originally going to be released theatrically by Paramount Pictures, but a deal was struck through Netflix for the release, which was not out of the ordinary for Nickelodeon, as they went on to make deals for Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus, and Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling. A completely bizarre choice, if you ask me. I don't know if Nickelodeon or Paramount on the back end own these films, or if they just are owned by Netflix forever, but that feels weird, doesn't it? I know we also just had Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie, on Netflix, but it just feels weird that for the rest of time, something like Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus, or the Roundhouse movie is just going to be owned exclusively by Netflix. I don't know, that it just feels off. Feels weird. And I'm not saying that because Paramount has their own streaming service. Of course, some of these deals, including Invader Zim and Rocko, were made long before Paramount Plus was a thing. But still, the fact that these pieces of Nickelodeon history now exclusively reside on this streaming service that is not exclusively there for Nickelodeon, I don't know, feels weird to me. Alongside the animation for the movie, which I just rewatched the trailer, and although it looks just like the cartoon, I think that's a bit of the problem. It doesn't feel like a bigger budget, not necessarily theatrical movie, even though this was at one point going to be made for theaters. Given the fact that we just have the Bob's Burgers movie come out and how gorgeous that looks as a TV cartoon making the jump to a movie, I don't know, that feels like there's just some extra bits here missing, and that's just from the trailer. I have no word on the actual movie itself, as I haven't seen it, but once I get through the Roundhouse show, I'll eventually get into the movie, and then I'll have more of an opinion on it. But until then, I have to go by yours. If you have an opinion on the Roundhouse movie or Paw Patrol the movie, definitely let me know in the comments below. Also, 1 year ago, on August 20th, 2021, we had the premiere of the rebooted Rugrats on Nickelodeon proper. It premiered earlier in the year on May 27th, 2021, exclusively on Paramount Plus, but the Rugrats are never going to truly feel at home unless they're airing on Nickelodeon, and that means commercials involved too. Now, as far as those movies that I forgot to mention over the previous few episodes in the months of August, I'll talk about those now, with the first one that came out just 3 years ago on August 9th, 2019, Dora and the Lost City of Gold. Directed by James Bobin. You actually guessed it correctly if you don't know this movie already and you heard the title and you're like, Dora, wait a minute. Is that a Dora the Explorer movie? Yeah, you're right. It's a live-action Dora the Explorer movie. Dora is played by Isabella Moner, and actually features Diego as well, her cousin, and makes reference a little bit to the show in the idea that when she was a kid, she had this wonderful imagination. But I gotta say, if you even watched Dora as a kid, very young, and just only have those few memories of it, and you think like, live-action movie has got to be for children. Yes, it is aimed towards kids, but I gotta say, it's an enjoyable experience. I enjoyed Dora and the Lost City of Gold. It made $119.7 million off of a $49 million budget. I enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed this next movie, which came out 8 years ago on August 8th, 2014, the rebooted Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Directed by Jonathan Liebsman, the movie made $493.3 million at the box office on a budget of between $125 to $150 million. Of course, this is also known as Michael Bay's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as he helped produce it, and Michael Bay was behind, of course, bringing Transformers to the screen and giving us that level of live-action energy, and a lot of that does kind of come off here in some ways, but I enjoy this movie, for the most part. It's certainly not the worst Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie I've seen. Not by a long shot. As a lifelong Ninja Turtles fan, there is very few things about this movie that truly offend me. You know, am I the biggest fan of the designs? No. But you know what? If real turtles got mutated, they wouldn't look the prettiest. I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I would even say I would much rather have better looking suits like the 1990s version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm fine with them looking cartoony because, I mean, if something mutates, who's to say what it would look like? Why does it have to look grotesque? It can look kind of goofy and have weird proportions. What does the Jim Henson Company bring to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles table in 2022? I kind of want to know. But unfortunately, everything's about CGI. But I love this movie for one thing. I love this movie because it did two things. For one, it casted Will Arnett as the character of Vern Fenwick from the 80s cartoon, and the fact that because of this movie, we got a sequel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, which gave us a pretty decent live-action Bebop and Rocksteady. Two of my all-time favorite, thug villains. Villains in general, they'd probably make my top 25. But in terms of lackeys, the grunts that are always being sent out, they're among some of the best. Bebop and Rocksteady are great, and the portrayals that we got in Out of the Shadows, hey, for the first time ever having live-action Bebop and Rocksteady, not bad. I'm actually a fan. But, this movie has a troubled behind-the-scenes story that I would say kind of just discussed to you a little bit on the dealings of Hollywood and the way they handle things, at least on the set, and just kind of a gross nature. And then even the man who played Leonardo, everyone else who played their turtle in the suits got to voice the turtle. The man who played Leonardo, Pete Polzek, I think how you say his name, his voice, apparently, they were just at the end, they decided, we don't like your Leonardo voice, and got Johnny Knoxville from Jackass to come in to voice Leonardo, who I know that the thought of that, just thinking of it, Jackass star Johnny Knoxville playing Leonardo of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles sounds weird. He does a pretty good job. I'll be real with you. This is coming from somebody who went from loving the Ninja Turtles and a part of my childhood with the Nicktoons, loving Jackass as a teenager, and then as an adult going to see a movie it was very surreal, but he did a good job for what I like about Leonardo in moments. It's just moments. That's how I find my likes and dislikes. Anyway, the Ninja Turtles are going to be coming back to theaters in a multitude of ways. First of which is going to be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, directed by the co-director for The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Jeff Rowe. Then a third live-action movie produced by Michael Bay, but apparently it's going to be another reboot, this time with a script written by Colin and Casey Jost, which hopefully, knowing their comedic backgrounds, bring some light to the Ninja Turtles. We don't need to be so dark and heavy. We can obviously go back to that first movie from 1990, which perfectly encapsulates the comic books in a dark, gritty setting while still letting the Turtles be and act cartoony. And it works. Why did they get it done more than 30 years ago and we're still sitting in a room going like, how do we write the Ninja Turtles? How do we make a Ninja Turtles movie? I don't know. Look at that one, and I'm not saying copy it, but don't make it obvious. That's all I'm saying. Now it's time for Captain Eric's Top 5 of the week, and since we were talking about Kenan and Kel, and I hadn't covered Kenan and Kel in the top 5 here, it just made sense to slot them in. Number 5, 3 Girls, a Guy, and a Cinemaplex. Season 4, Episode 5. Very simple situation that Kenan finds himself in. And when I mean simple, I mean ridiculous. He somehow finds himself with 3 dates all happening at the same movie theater. And trying to kind of go from each one time after time and then continually finding excuses to leave the theater and go to other dates and whatnot. It's hilarious. Stands the test of time. Number 4, Turkey Day, Season 2, Episode 11. Kel eats the Rockmore's turkey, and they scramble to fix things, and of course they don't, but hey, the effort that they put in is certainly hilarious. I recommend that around any Thanksgiving time as a traditionary video, because there's not many Thanksgiving movies and TV specials, so if you add any of them, Kenan and Kel, keep that in your rotation. Number 3, speaking of holidays, Merry Christmas, Kenan, Season 1, Episode 11. I've talked about this among some of my favorite Christmas specials of all time, as it just has one of the most beautifully simple stories you could tell. You know, Kenan wants something really expensive, works hard to make the money to earn this expensive item, and then decides to do the right thing in the end. Not only do the right thing, but go above and beyond in a way that I think most of us wouldn't do in that exact same regard. I think a lot of us out there certainly have a heart and would want to help others, and would certainly want to make sure that every kid out there has something to open up for Christmas and something that they desire. And when you can be the one to help that happen, it's a special moment, even if it's for one kid. Christmas time is always a time I reflect on that, because I always hate the thought of any kid waking up on a Christmas morning without at least something to open up. Something even of use. It doesn't have to be an expensive item. It could be something from the heart. But yeah, number 3 was Merry Christmas, Kenan. Number 2, Parental Guidance, Season 2, Episode 1, the Season 2 opener. Kenan has to invite his parents to a parent-teacher conference, or a conference with the principal. Either way, his parents have to come to the school, and instead of confronting his parents, he hires actors, really bad actors, who are just like B-movie actors, like over actors, stage actors, the Stephen Toast level of actors, to be his parents. He pays these random people to stage to be his parents, and it's just hilarious. One of my favorite episodes. It's number 2 here. You should watch it. It's certainly not a number 2 in quality, but number 1 is actually the anniversary episode that I mentioned earlier today. It's probably the most classic Kenan and Kel episode, even eclipsing the pilot. It is, of course, the one, the only, the tainting of the screw, in which Kenan finds a screw in his tuna can and decides to sue the tuna company over this injustice. And I mean, I usually stay away from spoilers, but it's probably the second most classic line in Kenan and Kel history, behind anything that has to do with orange soda, going down during the climax of the trial over this tuna company. Kel coming up as a key witness to the screw being found in the tuna can, admitting to the court that it wasn't the tuna company that placed the screw in the tuna can, it was himself. And what makes this funny is, in fact, earlier in the episode when Kenan launched this lawsuit, the tuna company offered him a settlement. Kenan could have just been handed a decent amount of money and walked away, but his greed kept him moving forward to the court appearance in which the truth eventually came out. I'd like to give credit to the director of this episode, Alan Rosen, as unfortunately this episode was written by Dan Schneider, who up to this point in my career doing anything Nickelodeon related, I've avoided thoroughly talking about. And I'm not going to do that right now, as I'm not going to just throw this bomb at the end of a celebration of Nickelodeon anniversaries. But I will say, as someone who does work with, a lot of Nickelodeon love in my heart, I will address it down the road in an appropriate manner, through appropriate means. But in the meantime, what I do want to say is, when it comes to giving credit to a project, a show, a movie, there are so many people who are a part of that process of bringing it to screen, and there are so many who go uncredited as a part of it, or those who get wrongly credited and never get the right amount of spotlight that they deserve. I work a lot with Nickelodeon, and I care about this stuff greatly, and I want to make sure that as I'm moving forward, those who properly deserve credit should get credit where it's deserved. And that's why I want to always make sure that for those who want to get in contact with me, if there's ever a wrong that needs to be corrected, or if there's ever information that'll help celebrate these anniversaries in a better way, please send me it at nickelodeonhistory@gmail.com. I want to make sure that those who have gone wrongly credited and uncredited for years, who have been a part of these processes of Nickelodeon, even if you helped come up with a catchphrase that had gone on to become an iconic one, but you just never got the right credit, those are the spotlights I want to be a part of. I at least want to make sure I'm doing the right thing here. Because, something like Kenan Kel, unfortunately, there are those who just get all this praise for an entire show, where there are so many writers who are a part of the process of making sure those characters are who they are, writing the jokes that make it onto screen that make you laugh, and then it's just so-and-so who gets the credit. Now, as far as Kenan Kel as a whole is concerned, you know what? I do want to give a lot of credit to Kim Bass, who in a nice, round, house-about way was a writer on In Living Color as well, along with creating another popular sitcom, Sister Sister. So here we have a writer for In Living Color creating Kenan Kel. You know what? I've heard enough interviews with Kim that he deserves a ton of credit, more so than any other name a part of this episode, other than the director, who I had already mentioned. But as far as everything that I could say on the subject, I'm going to end on that note. And it's going to end this week in Nickelodeon history. Thank you for listening along. Once again, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, send it over, nickelodeonhistory@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @I'mReadyPodcast and on Instagram @SpongeBobPodcast. Speaking of a SpongeBob podcast, please check out my other podcast, I'm Ready, a SpongePod Squarecast, dropping every Thursday. And please don't forget to subscribe to the Captain Eric YouTube channel, where you can also hit that little bell so you can be notified whenever the Captain puts something out. You can also purchase new and updated merch at the Redbubble link either in the podcast description or in the link from any of my socials. Anything that comes in from my projects is going to go directly back into my projects, and it's always greatly appreciated. By the way, if you have checked out that Redbubble link and you said at any point in the last 8 or 9 months, hey, there hasn't been any updated merch on here, I just want you to know, before the summer is over, there's going to be a few more designs on there that I've been working on myself. Designs all drawn completely by me. Designs that through Redbubble you can put on literally anything. If you like the Captain Eric logo and you don't want a shirt, you can put it on a hat, you can put it on a bandana, a bag, whatever you'd like. So I always make sure to let you know that things are updating on there. So check in ever so often. And if you ever have a way that you can contribute and help out, it's always appreciated here from the Captain. Thank you for being a part of the Ready crew. And as always, stay safe, be kind to one another, and come aboard again next week to another episode of This Week in Nickelodeon History.
On the Lord Hut, here we Nick. On the Lord Hut, here we Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low, while living #1 Nickelodeon.